All right, I'll go ahead and get started since it's 2:05. So happy New Year to everybody on the call. Hope everybody had a nice holiday season. And you were able to relax and enjoy family, friends, or whatever you do. But it is 2025, and this is a big year for us at the Broadband Office, and I appreciate those that are continue to stay engaged with us on our progress towards our Big Advance program. This meeting we're going to cover a lot because we have a lot to talk about regarding our programs. And so the agenda was sent to you guys, so hopefully you had a chance to look at it. But we're going to start out first with Paige. Paige is going to provide some legislative updates now that we're in full swing. So Paige, I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
All right, thanks, Brandy. So yeah, it's a big week. We have the 2025 General Assembly convening on Wednesday. And then we also have the Joint Technology Committee meeting on Wednesday. That's at 8 a.m. This is for a supplemental request hearing, so we're not expecting any broadband discussion. However, we are expecting them to announce the new committee members. The returning committee members are expected to be Representative Titone, Representative Weinberg, and Senator Baisley. The new members will be 2 Democratic senators and 1 Democratic House member. In the December 16th and 17th JTC meeting, Representative-elect Amy Pascal sat in on those, so we are expecting her to return and serve on the committee. Also in that meeting on December 17th, the CBO did present to the JTC, and you can listen to the audio recording if you'd like to do so. And then on Thursday, we have the Broadband Legislative Stakeholder Call that we are planning to have weekly, so if you haven't registered and would like to attend, please do so. And that's really all I have, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Paige? All right. Well, Paige will be online just in case anybody has any questions during this hour. But thanks, Paige. I know we're gearing up for another session, which is always a lot of fun and a lot of activity. And so I'm looking forward to working with the new members of the Joint Technology Committee, of course. And again, for our office this year, we're pretty light on legislative ideas or proposals at this point, but we are tracking a few things and we'll provide updates as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to jump right into the next piece of the next agenda item. So Capital Projects Fund, we're continuing to implement successfully these funds across the state. Projects are underway, and we saw some success last year with hooking up some of the first communities like Kiowa and Elizabeth, and then also reallocating or allocating some additional funding to Crowley County, which will connect the majority of that county, since it's so small, to high-speed internet. So we're really looking forward to those projects completing and many more happening this year. So we'll highlight those projects as they're in progress and completed. So continue to follow us on that. But with that, we had a little bit of money left over in our CPF funding based on how projects are progressing. So the remaining funding that we're trying to implement at this point is around $700,000 over our holiday break, if you will. I know for some of us it was a pretty good break. Staff got together and decided kind of what we would like to do with those remaining funds in the spirit of not sending any money back to the feds. Because these funds will expire at the end of 2026, and even though it's $700,000, we want to use every penny, if you will. And so obviously from our original list that we vetted with capital projects funds, there's not a project that's small enough that $700,000 would make a project go. And so the remaining list of projects exceed well over $1 million. And as some of you know who build networks and monitor networks, you can't build half of a project, you have to build all of it. So in the spirit of getting this money out the door quickly, we decided to set up a line extension program for the remaining funds. We think this is a good way to continue to connect people to existing networks, if you will. Middle mile, a piece of that, but mainly focusing on the last mile. So it's a quick way to make last mile connections to existing infrastructure. And then also what we would like to do is open this up to the vendor, not the vendors, the ISPs and partners on our list that have already been vetted and approved in the CPF program. With the understanding that, you know, they've already been approved, and they've already been vetted. They've already gone through all the federal requirements, and then they also are already building out existing infrastructure and networks. It's just a really good, efficient use of a small pot of money, and it makes a big difference. And again, we want projects that are ready to go. And so this we felt was a good way to spend the rest of that funding. And so we're in the process right now of setting up a line extension mini grant program to those who are successful in our CPF program. And so we'll be making that available here over it, probably sometime in January in the near future, opening that up for folks to submit an application to connect to extend broadband service to locations within their areas, within the existing network. This can include long drops as well. And so we're including that in this program as well. We are going to simplify this grant application. So we're only going to use a Google form and ask the questions that need to be asked just to make sure that we can evaluate the applications that come forward requesting funding. All of the requirements under the CPF program will be applicable to this program. So we're not rolling out an entirely different program that has different requirements. It's similar. It's identical to what we just approved last year. It's just really getting those line connections or line drops, line extensions done to existing networks that are still missing connections. And so we'll run a 30-day process for that. And then hopefully we'll wrap that up. How it interacts with BEAD, I think, you know, there's going to be we'll have to kind of make sure that we do some more deduplication of efforts, especially the BEAD program, because the BEAD program is ongoing. So our sense of urgency is around let's getting this out now so people know what to anticipate in their BEAD applications around too. So that's what we were thinking about for the remaining $700,000 in our CPF program. And so I'll stop there and see if anybody has any questions or feedback or suggestions or anything that maybe CBO hasn't contemplated. So I'll pause there and see if anybody has anything. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, I was just going to say, have ISPs expressed interest in this sort of thing?
Not specifically. They have not, but we do have over $1 billion in requests in our BEAD program. So with the oversubscription of our existing programs, I'm pretty sure there's a demand for it. And actually, you know, one of the things that we've heard quite a bit mainly is from consumers where, you know, their driveway's too long, the line's too long, or they can't afford the $25,000 being quoted from an incumbent. And so we have heard some of that just from the consumer side of the house. ISPs, I'm sure they would, this program would be a good fit for some of those connections that are on their network, but maybe just are a little bit out of scope. So we think it might be helpful just to connect more folks.
Okay, thanks.
Eric?
Yeah, so you mentioned it was intended for ISPs that are already been approved for, I assume, the CPF program. And would it be unserved and underserved addresses that are kind of adjacent to the areas that they already awarded projects but that weren't included? Is that kind of the intention, since I presume within their projects they're kind of committed to doing all of them? So is it just kind of adjacent locations?
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Go ahead, Sandra.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify, and I'm not an ISP and I can't pretend to know all that, but is this like giving them extra funding to do something that they should have been doing anyway? Is this, I don't understand. With the
Yeah, no. Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm just trying to figure out what the extra 700,000 would get them to
Yeah,
do that's not covered already, I guess.
so in the original CPF program, we didn't have enough money to do everything we wanted in that program in terms of connectivity. So there still are gaps as a result of CPF, and there are gaps as a result of BEAD round one. And so what we're saying is, especially for those in the that were vetted through the original program, um, you know, looking at your existing network, obviously to Eric's point, adjacent to your network, are there any line extensions that we can help fund that may be too expensive for you, right? The line drop, you didn't include it in your CPF application because it was, I don't know, 10,000 a drop or 25,000 a drop or somewhere in between. So for the ISPs that maybe didn't include those locations in their CPF application, we're asking those providers if funding were available, would you extend those lines to those locations that maybe you determined weren't viable in your original application. And so that's what we're talking about, Sandra. And again, it's not necessarily like what they were supposed to do, because we did extend a lot of high-speed internet through the original CPF program, but this is really intended for unserved first, underserved, of course, after that, from a prioritization perspective, and keeping in line with the original intent of the program, but getting to those locations that maybe got missed because we ran out of funding. So that's where we are. That's kind of how I would explain it, and hopefully does that clarify for you what we're trying to do there?
Well, yeah, I'm all as as long as it's going to cover more households. I mean, I'm all for it, and especially for
Mhm.
using the money efficiently.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to pick up more locations that maybe didn't receive funding because we ran out of money or the ISP ran out of money. So, and we don't want to have to give that back to the feds either. So want to
Right.
make the best use of those dollars. So,
Hmm. Okay.
and
Thanks.
again, it's not enough money. $700,000 is not enough money to do a really big network build. And when you look at our list, a lot of the projects, like I said, well exceed over $1 million, 1, 2 million, $3 million. So we're just kind of looking for quick wins that are low effort for CBO and our existing providers, but make a big impact when they're implemented in communities.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. I don't have any timelines yet on this, just so you know. We have to, my staff has done an excellent job, Judd and Allie Terry, coming up with the parameters and language and so forth of the program. And we have to submit an amendment to the Treasury Department. If you guys remember, the Treasury is responsible for administering the CPF program. So we have to get that approved. Treasury moves really quickly. So I was told, if we submit, probably looking at a 2-week turnaround for that, which is excellent. So we'll open that up as soon as we get the green light. I'm just looking at the program today to finalize a few things so I can get it over to Treasury tomorrow. So really excited to have a little bit of extra money to make those line drops happen. And again, how it works with BEAD is we'll just have to work on deduplication. All this broadband funding across the board is not, it doesn't tie in nicely with some of the programs. So that means we have to make sure that we do more, look at deduplication, so we're not funding existing commitments that are already out there in the field. Staff, does anybody have anything they want to add before I move on to the next thing? Right. Cool. All right, so advanced local program guidelines. So if you remember, this is a deliverable from House Bill 24-1336. This revamped our state broadband program, which is funded through the high cost support mechanism. funding that we use for to make last mile connections to locations that are unserved or underserved. Last year, we were successful working with stakeholders to revamp the plan to include not just last mile locations, but other priorities, other broadband priorities that are either not funded or underfunded, and recognizing that the federal government isn't going to be able to take care of all of our needs. So what's the funding source for that, and how are we using it? And so we came up with 1336. And again, I thought it was a great collaboration with the state and our partners, private and public. And so part of our deadline in that legislation was to run a public process on the grant guidelines. So thanks to everybody on the call who provided input, and those outside of this call. It was really, really helpful. And as always, CBO really tries to make sure that we pay attention to your comments. I always think it's hard to take public comment and then not try to implement some of those things to the extent that you can. We were able to implement a lot of, or include a lot of that feedback in our program guidelines. And we were responsible for publishing that final by December 31st of 2024. And we were able to do that a day early. We would have done it a few days earlier if I had if I had prioritized it earlier, but we had a lot going on obviously during the month of December. But we were able to do that by our legislative mandate. And there's a link here for you guys to, if you haven't been able to click on it, it's in the agenda. It's also on our website. And the reason I put this on here, because I just want to see and hear from you all based on, publishing that document and the process so far, if there's anything, if you have any initial reactions or anything like that, that maybe we should be thinking about. But, to the extent that we were able to meet those mandates, the guidelines are where they are. But just want to see if you guys are hearing anything in your circles on the guidelines or anything else. And I'll pause right there and see if anybody has anything to offer. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I think you were accurate in stating that you guys did a really good job of taking at least what I saw in your summary of comments and making adjustments to the guidelines based off of those comments. So that was heartening to see. I always feel like, government is the best at that. So I think you did a good job of adjusting where it made sense, especially when there were several comments that, really resonated, I guess, with you guys from the public comments that you received. In particular, I think the one where you allowed kind of more of the DOLA model of if there's in-kind, instead of disallowing it as part of the match, but only allowing it when it's been pre-approved. That's very much in line with the DOLA middle mile model. And I think for local governments and other entities that don't have large war chests of cash, it makes it possible for them to participate like they were the primary recipients of the DOLA middle mile funds, and that's the majority of what you still earmarked this for. So I think that was an important adjustment that will make that continue to hopefully be as successful as the DOLA middle mile one was.
Yeah, thanks for that, Eric. Yeah, and I hear you on government asking for public comment and feeling like it was just more of checking the box. I have over my career, I've always questioned that. And we really try hard. Like I feel like if you ask the public, you should try. And it's good. Yeah, and that was like one thing that came up with the in-kind. I think that's just hearing from everybody on the call and like in the field, understanding how to do it in a way that sets everybody else up for success. And I think looking at it ahead of the application, I think is key, because it's almost too late after everybody's paid a bunch of time and money to submit an application, and then they just didn't meet the mark or they didn't hit the nail on the head with the match part, which always doesn't feel good after the fact. But if we can have those conversations ahead, to level set, but also set those expectations around what we can and what we can't do, before everybody invests a lot of time and energy into it. I think that's really key. So it wasn't something we were necessarily able to do in our federal programs, but because it's the state, we do have a lot more flexibility. So I think that was a good addition and a great piece of feedback for the broadband office that we were able to implement. Any other reactions to the advanced local program guidelines?
No.
Andrew, you're off mute. Did you want to say something?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know.
It's okay.
Sorry.
No worries. All right. Anything else before we move on? Judd, do you want to offer up anything? Do you have anything you want to add? I know Judd did a lot of work on this, by the way, while we were in the middle of BEAD. So just, hats off to Judd. I think he kept the train on the track with everything else going on at the broadband office. So Judd, I'll let you say something.
No, I didn't have anything additional to add. We added that in-kind flexibility at the end, and I think it's good just to look at it up front. I think we'll allow things that are really, really obvious, not wild accounting gyrations and things like that. But as you know, this program is pretty flexible. It's got last mile, middle mile, digital equity or non-grant, non-deployment activities. It even has make ready or kind of short-term projects. So I know a lot of people are struggling with pole attachments, pole repairs, things like that. We call that short-term construction projects. So it even allows for that. So I think this would be a great state program that can hopefully fill in some of the gaps on these the federal programs.
Yeah, thanks for that, Judd. And again, thanks for all your hard work. Go ahead, Eric.
I had a question for Judd, actually, a clarification on the short-term project. And I noticed that too, and that was one of my comments as well, was on those make-ready or feasibility study type of short projects. As far as I could tell, they were included, but as a potential reimbursement as part of a larger grant, not as a discrete grant, or were they also could be a smaller project that was discretely awarded?
I think we have flexibility to do that either way. I mean, if it's such a small, like a research study or something like that, if it's a couple $1,000 or 10,000, 20,000, something like that, I think that we could make a recommendation to award that up front. Does it really make sense to wait 3 weeks and get their reimbursement check and things like that? So I know some of the small guys want to go look at that research and our feasibility study and see if they can make something work.
Yeah, I think that could be useful, especially since feasibility studies don't always show the outcome as being positive.
No.
And so it could be that there's no grant to get a reimbursement on, but you still need to do the study to determine that. So that could be helpful.
Yeah. Kind of all on a case-by-case basis. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great. Anything else on advanced local before we go into BEAD? All right, we'll jump into BEAD now. So there's a lot going on here, and I know from their stakeholder perspective, you haven't heard much since October 28th when the application closed. So we have been really busy working on the review of those applications that were submitted in the initial phase, and been working feverishly over the holidays, working on cures and requests for inquiries from the broadband office for applicants that we needed clarification on. And so where we are with it is this month is a huge month for next steps, and I want to kind of go over those next steps. A big piece of the next steps really required us to analyze what worked well in round one and what needed to change for round two. And so we took that analysis and we had to advocate at all levels of the government, quite honestly, for changes that required programmatic waivers by the NTIA. And that required a lot of federal advocacy, and the governor's office is on board as well. So we had to get everybody on board with what Colorado needed to drive participation in round two, but also make this program easier to apply for and administrate for ISPs as well as the broadband office. And so we worked with the NTIA on what that approval process looked like. We did get a green light for most of the requests that we made to the NTIA for programmatic changes and waivers to the actual NTIA program, or BEAD program. As long as they weren't in statute or in law, we had the ability to make those suggestions and recommendations. So after about a month of advocacy, a little bit over a month of advocacy, the NTIA got back with us and granted us mostly everything that we had wanted. I want to go over those really quickly. I'll highlight the big pieces that I think people need to know on this call, and we're going to publish our grant guidelines for the second round this week. So your stakeholders will have access to what round two looks like. We also included feedback from our stakeholders, because if you remember, we opened up, I think it was a 30-day process for collecting public comment on what round two could look like. And I was really pleased because a lot of the things or items that people included in their feedback were items that the CBO is already trying to advocate for. So we had a lot of alignment with what our stakeholders wanted. And I think a lot of that has to do with creating an environment where you guys can come to us and ask us for things, and also our outreach, and you guys our stakeholders participating in that outreach. So a lot of the issues we were able to resolve, and some of these issues have been issues since the inception of the program. So we made some progress there. So what does it look like? We're going to release these guidelines on January 10th. And we're releasing them early ahead of when we're going to launch round two. Our application process for round two, keeping my fingers crossed if everything on the back office works, January 27th is when we're going to open up round two applications. So folks will have a little over 2 weeks before we actually open up the grant portal again to read the addendum to our original grant guidelines and get familiar with them. We are going to set the program up the same way we did with round one, where we will have weekly office hours, real-time Q&A that will be posted to our website for those that are working on the applications. The application is open to anybody, so it's not something where if you didn't apply the first time, you're locked out. In Colorado, we recognize that it's going to take everybody to solve the digital divide in our state. Our state is very challenging to serve, so everybody's invited to participate. And so that's where we are. So you have a couple of weeks ahead of the application to open up. And I'll go into that here real quickly. So going back to the revised guidelines, I just want to highlight a few things. So the NTIA, they published their alternative technology guidelines. It's also here. So we've revised our addendum for round two to include some of those parameters and provisions. Couple of things with the grant program itself. We removed the $20 million project cap size based on feedback. We raised the low-cost service option to $50, but not to exceed $75 a month. Waivers for the low-cost option are still available. We will still have match waivers available, although if you provide match, your application is more. No, there's no slides with this. There's no slides at all, Judd. I'm just going over the table of contents for it. Yeah. Just high level stuff here. And so we still will have match waivers. But like I said, if you provide match, your application's more competitive. We definitely would like to see some match because we're tight on funds, and the more money we put together to build out these networks, the better. In the application itself, we're not calling the application a binding agreement. This was something that was expressed by some of our stakeholders that they felt like that was a little onerous and maybe scared some people off. The actual binding agreement is going to be the grant agreement. So we heard that loud and clear. We're also removing the requirement for a bid bond, so that's not required anymore. And some of these items will also apply to those in round one as well. So so we have that for round two. And so those are some of the big ones. I want to talk a little bit about the BEAD eligibility list. One of the things that we asked the NTIA, especially because we're still on version 3 of the map, we're kind of locked into that per the NTIA, I asked to be able to true up the version 5 and version 3 of the map so that we don't have locations on that BEAD eligibility list that are deemed served by the national broadband map. We cannot do that. We can't remove those locations, but what we can do based on evidence, we can mark those locations as we are not going to accept, we're not going to allocate BEAD funding to them. So that will be on the data map. They're not going to go away, but we're going to mark those as in we might not provide money for those locations that are on the FCC version 5 of the map. But one thing that was a big deal, and we talked a lot about it, and the initial reaction by the NTIA wasn't, they didn't really like this request, but they came around because, Colorado was awarded, we were allocated $826 million, and we received almost $2 billion in requests. I mean, the math just doesn't match. So one of the things that we said, and this was something that we heard loud and clear the whole time we were, implementing round one, and basically since the beginning of the program, is in the project areas themselves that we have drawn up, the requirement to serve 100% of those BSLs. We told the NTIA that this was a barrier to success, and we've said it a few times, because there's the high cost locations, and we heard providers tell us that they didn't apply because they couldn't afford their project based on some of those really, really high cost BSLs. And so, but we couldn't say anything, but you're required to serve them, just identify them, we'll figure it out. So to give people in round two reassurances that, they're not on the hook for all of those, is we got the NTIA to agree that 100% BSL coverage for those project areas is not required. So that's where we went. That was a big success for us because we knew it was an issue for our providers. We knew it was an issue in people applying to the BEAD program. It was something we heard numerous times. And even in our public comment, our market research that we did, we heard that again. So the NTIA came back and said, okay, you're no longer required to have everybody serve every single BSL in those project areas. And so what that means is after we publish the grant guidelines, the round 2 guidelines, we will then revise our map because we're still working on round 1 application. So we need to finalize all those data points. We're going to create a map or update our map. And we're going to color code it based on certain assumptions. So for example, color code based on these locations already have an existing commitment or funding commitment. These are version 5 locations that are already served, so not allocating funding. We're also going to color code the map to show that these are very, very extremely high cost locations. So we're going to be proactive in that, use what people have submitted to us, but also be proactive in what we think are the really, really high cost areas. And those can be bid on by other, alternative technology providers. And so we're gonna point those out. And then we're also gonna say, there's gonna be a color code for BSLs that are still unserved or underserved. We're prioritizing unserved and then underserved. So we'll have those that called out specifically in the map. The project areas themselves are gonna stay the same. I know a lot of people gave us feedback about how they're too big. But to change the project areas in our application tool would be a significant undertaking with the time frame that we have. So what we're saying is those project boundaries are there, yes, but now we're giving you the flexibility to pick pick what you can serve, and then we'll highlight other areas for alternative technology. It's going to be a little bit of an interesting analysis on the back end because we're not comparing apples to apples at this point. It's more of kind of leaning into how we traditionally have run our grant programs. But we think that with the money that we have, it makes sense because we can't get to 100% in those project areas with the funding that's been allocated. So we're hoping that helps people become more comfortable with bidding on the remaining locations. And we'll cover as much as we possibly can by doing that. And I think we'll see a good result in round 2 because of that. And then real quickly, Ralph, before I move on to your question, the use of alternative technology in rescoping. So we'll be using a lot of rescoping, looking at LEO, capacity and sub-grantees to help us get those really, really, really expensive BSLs. So maybe we definitely will have a lot more served in our second round because of that. But that's where we are. Those are the major changes. Of course, you can read when we publish this on the 10th, you can take a look at it. Anyway, I'll stop there. Ross, what's your question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand. So in effect, you're actually identifying a subset of project areas that you haven't identified in this extremely high cost category, but you would expect would be more reasonable cost, still high, but so essentially they can bid on a subset of the project area, excluding those. Are those hard and fast categorizations that you're using, or would they be able to say, well, that particular location is still extremely high cost and I don't want to bid on that one, but I'll bid on the rest of these?
Yeah, it's more of the latter. So it's a combination of both, if you will. You have our bigger project areas. So there's going to be BSLs, obviously, within those project areas that we're going to identify are eligible for BEAD. And providers can pick. So
Okay.
this is letting the market pick round 2, versus, kind of mandating everything be served. Because in round 1, even when we had providers bidding on those project areas and wanting and with their 100% served, what we found is they can't serve every location. Like it's just they can't. I mean, they're identifying those high cost locations for other alternative technology solutions. So we're already seeing that in round 1. But in round 2, we're just saying, okay, we're going to formalize this, practice because that's what happened in round 1. But we're going to make it a little bit easier for people and saying, okay, you can pick these BSLs in these subset of project areas. You're not required to serve the original 100% of the original project areas. And hopefully we can be more proactive. Well, I mean, proactive in the sense that we know everything about every single BSL, which is quite challenging, but really try to identify those using some of our methodologies to say, these are high cost BSLs. Alternative satellite, here you go. This is a good BSL to provide a bid on. And hopefully we can get some more permanent infrastructure with some of the way we set up some of these project areas and identifying those BSLs that we think are, still very viable to serve. So we're letting the market decide round 2, generally speaking, because of the funding that's available.
Do you have an idea of how much funding will be available for round 2?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Sounds good.
Yep. Is your hand up again, Eric? Or okay. Do you have another question?
It is. Yeah, you kind of answered it, but maybe I can get some clarification on something that you and Ralph were just talking about, and that's for the round 1 awardees, or at least the ones you intend to award to. There was a heavier binding commitment, from my understanding, on that round for the applicants to serve the locations that they specified in their application. And does that change anything with round 2, where they can go back and say, well, actually, we would like to not serve this BSL or this BSL because it was actually, really messes with, what we would like to do? Or are those kind of like, have you already got to those set of applications that are in stone now as far as what their commitments were and what they were going to serve in those areas? Or are those in flux as well?
I would say that no. I think round one, we're expecting the folks that submitted applications for those BSLs to serve those as part of round one. We're not anticipating going back and starting over or updating, because that's really challenging. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of money. And when you certified to submit the application, you were certifying that what you had in your application was true and accurate. So we don't really want to have to go back. Now, if there's some situation that warrants it, we might look into it. But from when we reach out to those applicants that we're done with round one and we're calling them provisional or conditional award, that's what you're going to be responsible for. That's what you're going to be responsible for. So we're going to take that once we're finished with the program, round 1 and 2, and that'll be your grant application. So we're not going back to the round 1 people to ask them to redo their networks. I think even going back to them for curing to remove BSLs that that aren't viable, because we have some of that going on in some of those applications, is very challenging for them. And it takes time, it takes a lot of money. So we don't want to go back and make significant changes to round 1 because of that. And unless it's like there's some extreme case, but I don't see that. When you submit an application, you're certifying that you're going to carry through with that application. So that's where we are. And because we need to get on to round 2 and finish the program as well. So if we're kind of always going back, we're just we're not going to meet our timelines, unless there's something crazy. I can't even think of off the top of my head what that would be, but round 1 is done. And so that's how we're looking at it.
So it was kind of incumbent on those round 1 applicants to have identified those particular addresses that there were already too high cost in their first application. And that's kind of what you use to kind of, create the idea behind the second application, but they needed to have done that already.
That's right. So yes, we asked that of people, over the course of that whole application. I mean, we got a lot of questions about how to do that from stakeholders in our Q&A. The self-identification was really helpful for us, to your point, to look at how we approach round 2. And the other piece of it too is we had some applicants that submitted applications that they were going to serve. They were going to serve those high cost locations with fiber, but because of the price per passing, we had to remove some of those locations. So then now we've identified those locations as in this, second round alternative tech. And I'll tell you the providers that did that for us, good on you for trying to help. But I think a lot of them are pretty relieved that they don't have to do that, because they still have to be on the hook for that match, right? So 25% of like 100 versus 50 is a big deal. So we've been working with applicants over the last several weeks, the last 2 months, to get to some point where we're like, okay, this is round 1. These are the locations you're not responsible for. Thank you very much for helping, but we think we don't have enough money to do that anyway, and neither do you probably. So now we're parsing those out, and those will be our alternative technology, good candidates for alternative technology, because we can't, to $1 million of passing, I know they say that isn't feasible. So that's hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on the any reactions on the so any going back, the grant guidelines will be available on January 10th. And then obviously if you have any initial reactions to the alternative tech guidance, CBO did provide feedback on that. And we have been pushing really hard and heavy to have the NTIA hurry up to get these out the door before our round 2 opens up. So very excited about that. And so I don't know, we can talk about it. But Carrie, go ahead. I'll let you ask your question.
Thanks, Brandy. I asked it in the chat, and I think I sort of got an answer just about when, understanding that the guidelines will come out on the 10th, but wondering when the actual updated maps will come out that you referenced to. And I think, you and I have talked about this, Brandy, but it's really important to my members that those updated maps come out with plenty of time to look at and review ahead of the application portal going live, because obviously, there's adjustments that need to be made, et cetera. Our members need to review those locations, see what makes sense for them to apply for. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there as you're looking at timing of when those updated maps will come out versus when the actual application goes live on the 27th.
Yeah, I'm pulling up my preliminary timeline. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so we want people to have time with the guidelines and the data. So what we're looking at is obviously publishing the guidelines on the 10th. And then hopefully no later than January 17th, we will have our map published, so a week later. And then the application will open January 27th.
Okay,
So
that's great. Thank
they'll
you.
they'll have 2 weeks with the guidelines, a week with the map. And with the map itself, I mean, I would love to give another 30 days to look at the map, but I think giving people at least a week, 2 weeks to absorb what we're putting out there is good. And then a lot of it in the books that were provisionally awarded, the data will be up there as well. We can't make a public announcement. The NTA won't let us, and that's fine. But that's where we are. So it'll be out the week of no later than the 17th. That's the plan tentatively. Now we're still working on it. So if it slips, hopefully it doesn't, but that's our intent for right now.
Okay, thank you.
BEAD application closes on the 28th of February. So giving you guys a month. Again, I know people asked for 45 days in the comments. We're kind of giving you 45 days with publishing the grant guidelines and the map early. So hopefully people take advantage of that review. The application really isn't going to change. So, what we're working on is a technology piece, the portal, to see how we do it, how we set it up so that those that have applied don't have to submit the same information. So more to come on that, but that's the intent. Any questions on anything that we've covered so far? Okay, so I talked a lot about round one. And like I said, we're almost done reviewing round one. We're going to review additional round one applications starting this week based on some of our assumptions that changed, especially since NTIA's given us some programmatic waivers. So for those that we think the application might be in a good place, we'll reach out and ask for clarification on some of those applications. So, but January is a big month for us. Obviously, this first quarter is a big month for us. So, a lot going on with BEAD and also CPF and advanced local and everything else. So, I think we're tracking pretty well. And again, we just really appreciate the support and all of the feedback that everybody across the state has provided. It's been really, really helpful. And not only asking the NTIA for some leniency, but also making our grant programs better after each round. So we're really happy and excited, and we just really appreciate the collaboration and partnership. So I'll stop there and see if anybody has any thoughts before we close out. Anything that we need to discuss next time, we can put that on the agenda as well. But there's a lot going on, so I'll see if anybody has anything else before we close out.
Just a question. Have we covered the round one announcement information?
Yeah, the round one, the round one announcement is the provisional awards
Oh,
that we're
okay.
going to reach out to individual applicants. We can't do a big dog and pony show with that. So I just wanted, because we're being asked when we're going to tell people when we're going to make our announcement, and we got clarification from the NTIA. It can't be like a big announcement. So for those that are provisionally on the short list of folks that we're anticipating extending awards to, we're going to let them know individually.
Okay.
So that's how we're going to handle that based on what the NTIA asked us to do.
Okay. Okay. I missed that. Thank you.
No worries. Anything else? Going once, going twice. All right. I guess we'll call it 2025 then. Alrighty. Well, as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us this afternoon on the first week of first full week of January in 2025. And again, if you have anything in the meantime, certainly reach out. Keep participating in our calls, and there'll be more from us over the next couple weeks. And we're excited. So, if there's nothing else, you guys have a good rest of the afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Take care.